That time I got reincarnated as a slime. Volume 17. Chapter 1. Mjolmile's Ambitions. My name is Mjolmile, and yes, I'll freely admit I've had more than my fair share of luck in my life. But you know what? The stuff I've experienced lately, well, luck doesn't even begin to describe it. Looking back, I suppose my luck turned unshakable once I accepted Sir Rimuru invitation. Sir Rimuru, in so many words, is my boss, but let me tell you, he's a lot more than just some faceless master I serve. After all, he's the head of the Jura Tempest Federation, its king, in other words. A demon lord, to boot. Not joking. I mean it. Since the day I met this Sir Rimuru, I've instinctively known that he wasn't one to be trifled with. Even now, I see him as this god, or goddess-like figure, and frankly, they say he's far stronger than I could ever imagine. I mean, think about it. He saved my hide once by defeating a sky dragon, a monster powerful enough to destroy entire cities, maybe even overthrow a small nation or two. That alone makes him a hero and someone I owe well near everything, but not long after that, I heard he joined the Octagram. Just about fell out of my chair, I did. And that's hardly all. He's close friends with Lady Milim, the kind of demon lord you'd hear about in legend, or fairy tales, really, and he even recruited Sir Veldora, one of just 4 true dragons in the world, to his side. You know, I'm so exhausted from all these surprises that whenever I hear something new about him, it just makes me think, oh, neat, and that's all. But enough about Sir Rimuru. Let's get down to business. My principal ambition in life was to become a great merchant, one big enough that nobody would dare make light of me. I ran an enterprise in a small nation called Bloomond, with another branch in the much larger kingdom of Inglesia. I became fairly well known in my field, and just when business was really starting to boom, I received a rather large-scale proposal. Fuse, the guild master serving Bloomond, reached out to me, and that was how I wound up meeting Sir Rimuru for the first time. Next thing I knew, the newly crowned demon lord was visiting me, and even inviting me to assume a rather lofty position in his monster kingdom. In essence, I'm now serving as Tempest's finance minister. My exact title tends to change pretty often, but the nature of the job doesn't. Basically, I take all the vast fortunes the kingdom accumulates and transfer them over to whatever department needs it, at my discretion. Back when I was still a merchant, part of the sales from my multiple businesses would come back to me as remuneration. From that I deducted investment purchases, labor costs, and what have you, and funneled what remained into my operating expenses. That was hard, but what I do now is hard in a different sort of way. The amounts of money I work with, I mean, my gross salary once upon a time was a proverbial drop in the bucket, or a drop in the ocean, really. As for what it is now, well, why hide it? It's 50 gold coins a month, and that's after taxes. And, lest we forget, that doesn't even include bonuses, assorted stipends, and the extra credit I get to cover my housing costs. As if that weren't enough, I also have people from Tempest's job training center working as maids at my home, so the kingdom's largely covering maintenance and so forth for that as well. It's simply an unheard of deal. In fact, I could hardly contain myself when they offered it to me. Of course, I do still have to take care of the people who joined me from my old home office in Bloomond, but most of them are still working under me anyway, so their salaries are covered by the Tempest government as well. The only folks I directly employ around here are Beath and the guys I hired to watch my house, and 20 gold coins are enough to cover that. But that's not even the real surprise. You see, I'm not a single income type of person. I have certain other passive income streams, too. One is the profit earned from my old trading firm. I've been helping Sir Rimuru implement all his wild ideas, starting with the fast food stalls he suggested for the Founders' Festival. We've been deploying these in Bloomond and at the rest stops along the highways, but I'm the general manager of all these new locations. Day-to-day operations are handled by Tempest, but for reasons I don't understand, though I'm certainly not complaining about it, they pay me a salary for that as well. As Sir Rimuru is fond of saying, he and I are bound by fate. Molly, he told me, when you make money, that fills my coffers as well. Doesn't it? It's money you earn, After all, by making my ideas happen, so you deserve to share in the benefits, don't you think? I have his full support, in other words. Plus, I wasn't aware of this. Apparently the contract between us stipulates that Sir Rimuru and I each get an equal share of the profits. By contract I don't mean anything written down on paper, but it sounds like Sir Rimuru is absolutely willing to comply with this agreement. So, you see, I have quite a bit of motivation to live up to Sir Rimuru's expectations, and I do a very good job at it. As a result, I receive a good 100 gold coins per month from all the storefronts I'm involved with. There was a great deal of upfront investment, mind you, so my overall profits aren't staggeringly high yet, but we're both certain that they'll increase going forward. Our current locations are expanding their reach, and we've also received requests for more branches from all manner of different countries. I'm thinking that we'll have more variety to the restaurants we offer as well. There are so many dishes, so many types of cuisine, that Sir Rimuru has enlisted Gobichi to create for him. I receive the side benefit of getting to sample all these delicacies first, too, and overall it's an investment opportunity I'm not going to turn down. The burger places and ramen shops are all going gangbusters, let me tell you. The hibachi locations are starting to make a name for themselves as well, and we're working on a concept for something called ice cream that I'm rather excited about. We're also providing all our latest culinary inventions to the inns along the highways, and if these concepts prove to resonate with our audience, I'm sure we'll be adding even more restaurants. Thus, realistically speaking, I think I'm all but guaranteed to see profits commensurate with my investments. At this rate, I'm no longer excited to learn how much I make per year, I'm more terrified to learn the number. You have to keep in mind, after all, that in the space of under a year, I've stashed away enough coin to live like a king for the rest of my natural life. It's an absolutely unbeatable business arrangement, and that's not even all of it. I have another income source, you see, and that lies in that little reg organization I'm a member of. Reg refers to a group consisting of Sir Rimuru, Her Excellency Elmesia of the Sorceress Dynasty of Thalion, and me, Guard Mjolmile. It's our initials, you see. Elmesia, the Heavenly Emperor, is truly a divine being. Nothing at all like me, to be certain. It's said that if you want to meet with the nobility of the world's more powerful nations, the waiting list can be several years long. When it comes to royalty, you may never receive an audience, no matter how hard you try. It's a simple matter of power. Folks say Thalion is as powerful as all the Western nations combined, and they've been supporting Tempest since its founding, so we've been able to bask in the glorious light of Emperor Elmesia for a long time now. I'm led to believe that Elmesia is treated as a god in her home country, and considering that Sir Rimuru's made her his drinking partner, one can only guess how mighty a leader he is. Why am I part of this little social club of adult beverage enthusiasts? At this point, I honestly can't remember. But thanks to that, here I am, sitting around with the Heavenly Emperor and even referring to her as Big Mama for reasons that, again, I don't recall. So people have come to refer to us as the three pranksters and the like, but nobody knows exactly what Reg is involved with. It's the very top among top secrets, so only a select few are allowed to be clued in. Within Tempest, that's Benimaru, CI, and no one else, just those two. CI's been lending us personnel and support for our projects, so we can't leave him in the dark about them. Benimaru, on the other hand, came in on Sir Rimuru's introduction. I can recall the conversation vividly. "Hey, you're gonna get married someday, aren't you?" I didn't have any plans." "Well, if you wanna prepare for that, you need to save up a little stash, you know. Like, some spending money you can hide from the wife so you can go out and have fun." "No, my lord, I'm already well compensated." "Oh, quit acting so dumb. You gotta hide at least your official yearly salary, or else you'll have a lot of trouble keeping up with all your male friends' drinking outings." I will, sir." "Oh yes. A man needs to be resourceful like that." I'm not sure if Sir Rimuru was giving him wholly sound advice, but it wasn't any of my business, so I didn't speak up. I just let it slide, wisely concluding that it'd be best to stay out of it. Besides, I knew that Benimaru, who, as our highest-ranking general, is Tempest's de facto Minister of War, earns the same salary I do, and you'd have to be quite the tippler to spend 600 gold coins a year on your bar tab. But anyway, oddly enough, Sir Rimuru seems rather petrified that Lady Shuna will find out about our reg plans. I'm sure he recruited her brother Benimaru in no small part to stand guard and ensure nobody got wise. Either way, though, we have Benimaru helping us out and CI lending us staff. These employees serve as our people on the ground, executing the plans of Reg, our little secret cabal. The exact plans came from Sir Rimuru, who honestly had quite an insight. The core of them is to establish a sort of three-way deadlock. We retain full control over Reg, this underground group that's not afraid to get its hands dirty, or bloody, and at the same time, we also build a couple of clean firms that compete in public. If we built a single giant firm, it'd start to rot on the inside over time, and either way, we knew Tempest had already earned itself a lot of enemies. So we decided to divide our activities between two organizations, then have them compete against each other. That energizes the market, and as these two firms compete, they're also set up to work in tandem as needed. That, hopefully, anyway, will prevent any internal corruption. This structure, of course, will take years to fully develop. Sir Rimuru is working on a vast timeline, and I gotta admit, I would have never come up with a thing like that. Either way, my job was to put together one of these two public firms. Big Mama, meanwhile, was building her own, mainly comprised of former employees of the Rotso family over in the Kingdom of Doran. This resulted in something called the Western General Trade Company, a group filled with people openly hostile toward Tempest. In order to compete with them, I was forming the Four Nations Trade Alliance, and I needed to get it up and running pretty damn fast. As we planned it originally, the FNTA was a parent organization overseeing major movers and shakers in Tempest, Bloomond, Farminus, and the Dwarven Kingdom. The merchants I recruited after the Founders' Festival served as my ground team. We'd starve them of customers, ostracize them from their home nations, rob them of their support staff, and then we'd offer them a helping hand. Work for me, I tell them, and I guarantee you'll keep a roof over your head. Not many were foolish enough to refuse the offer. How could they? We made sure newspapers around the world reported heavily on us, so we were well known to people, notorious, even. Not many decent folk would trust an organization like that, so we positioned ourselves as their last resort, in a way. The journalists did such a good job for us, and it goes without saying that Sir Rimuru and Diablo's manipulation of them was downright scary. Thanks to that, my work went almost laughably well. Some people picked up on what we were attempting, of course, and, really, I bet the majority did, actually, but we'd never recruit anyone useful unless we took this approach. We did pay the salaries we promised everyone, too, so nobody had any right to complain. People's pride got in the way sometimes, but we could deal with that. Merchants are very opportunistic people, you see, willing to allow just about anything if it means profit. We gave them better positions and salaries if they proved worthy of them, and in time, their complaints dwindled. Before long, they were swearing allegiance to me. This group of employees, by the way, also included Bark, my former head clerk. He was faithfully paying off his debt to me as he grew into an excellent manager, so I recruited him for this work in exchange for cancelling his balance. He always felt like he owed me, if you will, and already he was working out better than I'd imagined. We were finding talented recruits in all sorts of other places. When Fuse explained matters to the King of Bloomond, the king promptly gathered his most trusted ministers and set off to train people for the future to come. The Dwarven Kingdom sent us a number of talented bureaucrats as well. As long-lived as they are, one has no chance at a promotion over there unless the person above them leaves. Those sharp enough to spot this opportunity from us were all but lining up to join. That sort of ambition is real important to see, you know. I heard the Western General Trade Company that Big Mama was forming had a number of long-lived elves join them as well. We had dwarven staff pitching in for us, but elves would certainly be stiff competition for them. Farminus, meanwhile, was an issue. We actually needed to intervene in order to get a branch built there. The Free Guild helped us as well, but I suppose keeping the kingdom stable was their first priority. This was all stuff we expected, however, so we were taking a long-term view on that region. That's why we pitched in for now, hoping that they'd train up their personnel for the future. Beyond that, though, we faced a lot of other problems. If we were going to expand into the Western nations, well, we had nowhere near enough staff for that. Reg had been expanding this whole time, crushing other organized crime groups and absorbing them into itself, and I was honestly quite jealous of them. Those sorts of companies could get away with that, but what a company and the public I needed was talented people you could rely on to get the job done. We're sending our recruits over to Tempest for education, but I'm afraid it'll be several years before we see them exercising their full potential. Besides, in my business, trust is everything. That's my philosophy, you see. Leaving important work to someone you don't know well goes against everything I believe. That, of course, meant we needed to pick and choose our employees carefully, and, as I feared, we faced employee shortages as we expanded into other nations. I decided to bring this up with Sir Rimuru. That is an issue, he said. The staff in my country are all monsters, after all. Not all humans will like to see them walking around. No, they won't. As talented as many of those monsters are, I'm sure they'll become more accepted once people work together with them, but I fear now may not be the time to force the issue. I agree with you there, Molly. If the monsters they look down on work too well, they'll become the target of envy next. I can't have the humans persecuting them. Working too fast here wouldn't be smart. So we were on the same page there. But what should we do, then? As we pondered this, Sir Rimuru offered a potential solution. Well, so be it. I know someone who can help with this. She seems pretty talented to me anyway. He called in Testarossa, who answered directly to him. Testarossa served as a diplomatic attaché, and an excellent one, too, by the sounds of things. I had already been introduced to her, but she was so beautiful, I could barely have a coherent conversation with her. I didn't fare any better this time, either. You called for me, Sir Rimuru? That kind, affectionate smile, on that incredibly pretty face. The aroma wafting around her was so astounding, I was instantly cowed into silence. I just sat there, mouth wide open, as Sir Rimuru and Testarossa began to discuss matters. So, we're running pretty short on staff. I see. Perhaps I can help you with that. I could have my own underlings assist you. Oh, you can? I'd appreciate that, yeah. Keep in mind, this is a secret operation, so don't tell anyone else about it. A secret between me and you, Sir Rimuru? Then I promise I won't tell a soul, and neither will my minions. If any one of them leaks it. She let out a low snicker. One look at that grin, and I knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that our secret was safe. That settled things for the time being. But then Testarossa smiled at me. Sir Guard, I will instruct them to obediently follow any order you give them. Her voice sounded like the trumpets of heaven to me as it made its way through my brain. Testarossa, the Testarossa, was addressing me by name. Thank you very much, then. I couldn't help but blurt out. I now had Testarossa's support, and after that, things proceeded at a scarily fast clip. In the space of a few months, we had 4 Nations Trade Alliance branches in every member nation of the Council. Many of these were quite small, with perhaps 10 employees at most, but it would suffice for now. This alone was a great surprise to me, but soon I was greeted by an even more shocking event. It turned out that, somewhere along the line, I of all people had been picked as the FNTA's director. We are leaving everything to you, King Gazelle told me. If Rimuru places his trust in you, Njolmile, I certainly can as well. Hearing this high praise made even someone like me freeze up in anxiety. But if that was what the king was saying, none of our dwarven bureaucrats would be against it. If they were, they never betrayed it in their work. Yom was just as appreciative. We're the ones being helped here, he said, and I got no complaints about that so far. So hang in there, okay? Then he brought his lips to my ear and whispered, can't be easy, huh, being wrapped around Rimuru's finger? To me. Not for either of us, I retorted with a grin. But thanks to that, I couldn't possibly be having more fun. Yum smiled back at me, so I can only assume he understood. Blumund, meanwhile, was a slog. The people over there might have seemed sensible and open to debate, but my instincts told me that Daram, king of Blumund, was not someone to trifle with. And of course I was right, you know. The negotiations were an exercise in futility. Ho ho ho. The director of this trade alliance will likely wield untold power in the future, enough that not even a king could turn their head. If you were to take this position, Mjolnir, that would put my mind at ease. I'd been expecting the worst, but the way he put it, he was open to a wait-and-see approach. Ha ha ha. Well, I'm quite honored. In that case, I look forward to. By the way. Here we go. I steeled myself. Our nation is currently training people who will serve in Rimuru's plans. It seems natural to me that this staff would be guaranteed employment once their training is complete. Ah yes, of course. I'm sure the plans would never work at all without their cooperation. You believe so? That's quite a relief to hear. I imagine you are aware, then, of the current situation in my kingdom? The situation, Your Majesty? I replied, unsure what he was talking about or how I should answer. The king maintained a friendly smile as he told me something that sounded utterly preposterous. Let me be blunt, then. Our nation has completely abandoned all agricultural activity. We've released all the crops and provisions in our treasury, so our people will have something to subsist on. I would like to ask for some support along those lines, if I may. What? I was stunned into silence. But protesting wouldn't achieve anything. Of course, we will do whatever we can, but I'm afraid my current post does not allow me to make such policy decisions. Oh, I'm sure Rimuru would give his permission with a smile. We're letting him build the world's central station, the main nexus point for Magitrains, in our lands. Given that contribution, I hardly imagine he would simply abandon us. That's crazy. I wanted to shout at him about how unsound his logic was, but a part of me thought it made sense, too. This king had staked the entire future of his kingdom on Sir Rimuru's plans. Would it prove to be a foolish mistake, or the work of a wise ruler? Or, isn't it my job to ensure he's making the right move? I think it is. If people decide the king erred on this call, it'll mean Sir Rimuru's plans have failed. We'd been facing severe staff shortages even before this. If the whole population of Blumund was willing to work for us, it'd help us out in all kinds of ways. Really, I had just one answer for him. Ah yes, I'm sure he wouldn't. You certainly have me there, Your Majesty. In that case, I promise you that I will endeavor to bring Blumund to a state of full employment. Ho ho ho. How reassuring to hear, Mjolnir. And I hope you'll continue to let us rely on your good graces going forward. With that in mind, I would like you to call me simply Daram from now on. Whoa now. This was a surprise. A king wanted a common merchant like me to drop all formalities? Oh, that would be far too untoward of me. I motioned to turn him down, fearing a trap, but... Mjolnir. Or actually, why don't I call you guard instead? No, I'm simply here on behalf of Sir Rimuru. I'm a commoner, you see. Ho ho ho. No need for modesty now. Besides, guard, given your connections with both Rimuru and Emperor Elmesia, can one truly think you are a mere commoner? Because not even I am fully awarded that luxury with them. The king looked deadly serious. He and Sir Rimuru were acquainted with each other and I knew they got along well enough, but if he was stacked up against the heavenly emperor of almighty Thalion, he'd look like the king of an anthill by comparison. It was written all over his face, and I couldn't deny he was right. I had been turning my eyes away from the truth, perhaps, but Big Mama was truly an invincible juggernaut. No, the king of Blumund was undoubtedly trying to form a closer relationship with me here. Referring to me by my first name was an honor, something I certainly appreciated as part of building our ties. But how should I react? Well, was there any need to hesitate? I mean, The king of Blumend's last name is, well, Blumend. Besides, we had his son Prince Figaro running the Western General Trade Company. I figured I was safe. All right. King Daram, then. Hold on. Let's refer to each other as equals, why don't we? You can even call me Dory if you. No, I'm afraid that's simply too off the wall. Or dangerous, even. You think so? I know so. Phew. But all right. May I at least refer to you as the good Sir Daram? Carefully, I adjusted his title a bit, trying to satisfy his request. If someone saw this as too rude, I'd be deservedly thrown in the dungeon, but I trusted that wasn't going to happen. But Sir Daram just smiled back at me. He. You've made me very happy. Building such a close friendship with someone like you, guard, who has the Demon Lord's ear at all times, makes me feel more powerful than ever before. I look forward to continuing our relationship along these lines. Apparently I was Sir Daram's friend now. I looked around the throne room, wondering if anyone was going to voice an objection to this. However, although the king had all his dour-faced ministers standing behind him, not one of them made a peep. In fact, they were smiling at me in relief. I could only take this to mean that Sir Daram was serious about all of it. He was investing everything he had into the Four Nations Trade Alliance, this multinational organization I was directing, really betting his entire nation on it, and on me. What an unbelievable gamble. Even I would have had trouble making such a momentous decision. Looking at it that way, the King of Blumend was truly one of the world's boldest figures. Yes indeed, I look forward to building a long, fruitful relationship. And I'll try to prove to you that I'm not merely coasting on my lord's good name. With all the respect I could muster, I bowed to Sir Daram. After our meeting, I had some other practical business to handle in Blumend. Viard, who had lately been promoted from Baron to Viscount, gave me a briefing on current affairs. The kingdom apparently had a year's worth of food remaining, and its educational program was progressing well. The more talented students were already being sent across the land so they could contribute early in their careers. Of course, I don't think I'm delivering shocking news when I say that our nation is gifted in espionage. Our agents are currently deployed in many countries, handling work like price research for us. We're also training people for the bureaucracy, under the philosophy of wise people, bountiful country. People young and older coming together to learn about world affairs and economics. The smile never faded from the Viscount's face as he spoke, but this rather extreme political move he described left me speechless. I hadn't doubted Sir Daram's words at all, but I also hadn't thought they were going this far with it. The king's subjects sounded just as resolved to this as he was. But I can't sit here acting shocked forever. Very well, then. In that case, I will go over the current progress of our own plans. No point hiding anything. I went over all the stuff we were up to. First, the Magitrains. Development was proceeding well with them. We had laid tracks from the terminus in Dworgen through the planned station at Farminus. Construction had progressed to a point just a bit before Blumend in the middle. Crops and produce from Farminus were being sent to Dworgen, and there the Magitrains' loads were replaced with industrial goods. These would get sent off to Farminus, which would take what it needed before the remainder moved on to Blumend, which needed to become a great hub for goods in time. Of course. I suppose sanitation and storage for food commodities will become important work in the future, then? Indeed it will. I'd also want to ask Blumend to work out where necessary goods should go, and who they should be sold to. Yes, naturally. I am stating as much to the employees we are deploying on the field. I had heard Viard is friends with Fuse, but he's just as wily at the bargaining table, isn't he? And come to think of it, Sir Rimuru did tell me to watch for how sharp Viard is. He certainly was right, Viard's not someone I can let my guard down around. Excellent. So what are you doing with the land you're no longer raising crops on? We have plans underway for that as well. We've already procured the necessary land for World Central Station, which we plan to build near the capital. Most of the land around it will be left empty in all directions so the station can be more easily connected to the highway system. Oh, we also have land on the outskirts of the capital ready to serve as a logistical hub connected to World Central. You do? They were so well prepared, I didn't even know what to say. Soon, we were deep into frank negotiations, no longer trying to cow each other into submission. We and Tempest would provide a labor force to build the gigantic World Central Station and open a rail line to Dworgen. The plan was to then build new lines going to Thalion and Inglesia. As this was happening, we decided that Bloomond would build an array of warehouses on the empty land they had prepared for us. Through this, we could already picture a future where Bloomond was a vast, powerful industrial region. This would lead to a rise in land prices, no doubt, so it was vital that we secured the most favorable acreage urgently. Bloomond was clearly going to become a trade hub in the future, and I planned to buy the best land possible before then. Now, I continued, as for our Four Nations Trade Alliance branch, I'd like to build a new one for us, which would make the current location just a temporary site. No worries there. We have some prime spots for it. I began to have a bad feeling about this. I tried reading into Villard's intentions, but they were all too hidden by his villainous smile to make out. And you're willing to give us this land? The cost of the land needed for the rails and stations would be shared equally between us going forward. In exchange for the expertise and labor we provided, we wouldn't be charged anything, something we'd already come to an agreement on. The procurement of land for our branches, I had saved for later, and already I saw dark clouds on the horizon. And I was right. No, I'm afraid I can't offer that. In the Kingdom of Bloomond, we've adopted a new system where all land is the property of the nation, with the king lending it to his people as needed. He got me. That was such a drastic, evil move, not even I would have come up with it. I mean, good heavens, how did they even get that law passed? Hats off to them for pulling it off. I can't even imagine how they convinced the nobles to give up their vested interests. And, how much are you charging for the use of this land? Our current plans call for 1 silver coin per square meter. It wasn't outrageous. It wasn't cheap, either, but if you wanted to rent land in Inglesia, you were looking at 3 silver per square meter, at least. We'd have to pay a de facto income tax every year on this land, but better to procure it now than later. But we had a bigger problem. Profit didn't matter as much at this point. I was facing the looming threat of Bloomond calling all the shots on this rail project. A disaster. Sir Rimuru could be strangely careless about this sort of thing, but Big Mama never gave an inch. I could already picture her frowning at me and saying, "Why'd you let them change their conditions midway, All would have been fine and dandy as long as we formed a good relationship, but the thing about people is that they come and go." That made it so important to gain permanent rights to the land we wanted. What if they decided to raise the rent on us? Not that I thought they would. If the price hike was within reason, we could accept their terms following a discussion, but if they charged something extortionary, it might just turn into a national-level crisis. And, well, I'm fully aware all of this is what-if territory. But Big Mama told me to always think about any possibilities that might come up. If we have control of the land, we can reject any unjust demands on their part, but if they have it and don't bend on their terms, we'd be in trouble. If conflict occurs, well, it's the landowners who have the upper hand, isn't it? We'd have to pick up our ball and go home. That's why I wanted those land rights. If having them wasn't possible, it'd make it damned hard to spend too extravagantly on that land. But as I pondered my next move, Villard grinned at me. Now, we plan to adjust the rent depending on the economic situation, but Mjolmile, I happen to have some good news for you. Aha. He was starting to get under my skin. What news is that? Oh, it's very simple. As a symbol of our good relations with your country, the Kingdom of Bloomond is prepared to offer you some concessions. Concessions, you say? Yes. To be precise, regarding the prime spots I mentioned, we are willing to negotiate a permanently binding lease agreement that will recognize the land as extraterritorial areas. You are? I made my surprise known to him. It was almost too good to be true. And before I could even think about what ulterior motive he might have, Villard seemed ready to explain it to me. Now, let me just say that there is no catch. His Majesty Durham Bloomond made that proposal himself. I was against it, but it was accepted after the other ministers sided with him. The idea has certain pros and cons for us, you see. The obvious minus, of course, is that other nations might look down on us if we sell our land piecemeal like this. Yes, I suppose they might. I was surprised he wasn't hiding more about this, but I had a pretty good idea about the potential pluses for them, too. As for the benefits, well, we fully expect that Tempest will aggressively invest in us if we commit to this. And we decided that Bloomond can retain certain advantages through the exact conditions of our lease agreement. Meaning? Those conditions were what I was worried about. Oh, nothing too intricate. First, we'd like you to hire our citizens as your employees. Second, we'd like you to build the headquarters of the Four Nations Trade Alliance in our nation. Aha. Now it made sense. If we built the FNTA's main office in Bloomond, they'd be more than just a logistical center, they could become the nerve center of the entire world economy. I could even conceive of them taking over Ingleisia's current position at the head of the table. Bloomond's stock would skyrocket, really. So would the cost of its land, no doubt. If nations around the world built embassies there, the real estate proceeds alone could be a potential profit center. That business, unlike the tourism industry, wasn't as vulnerable to dips and rises in the economy, and even better, it'd create more jobs for the Bloomondians. As long as they were serious about casting their lot with the FNTA, it was a bet that could pay off in spades for them. It was honestly impressive to see from Sir Durham. He's a natural-born gambler, ain't he? And besides, the idea of Bloomond taking center stage in world economics had been part of Sir Rimourou's concept as well. So, having no objections to any of this, I eagerly gave Viard my agreement. Soon enough, after hammering out all the little details, we had a formal treaty in place. It was designed so that both nations retained their own vested interests, the agreement would be void in times of war, and so forth. I was fairly happy with this treaty, or I thought I was anyway, but for future reference, I still wanted to hear Viard's true feelings on the matter. Now, if I could ask you a question. Yes? You see, Viscount Viard, apparently, you were personally against signing this agreement. May I ask for your own thoughts on this, now that it's been ratified? The FNTA had received some pretty favorable terms, after all. They'd create some red tape for Bloomond as it dealt with other nations. Maybe Viard wasn't dead set against this, but I wondered if he wasn't the greatest fan, either. Oh, you're asking about that? Viard paused to think for a moment. Then he stood up, not looking at me, and walked over to a nearby window. He coughed as I pondered what he was doing. I am going to talk to myself for a moment, so please ignore me, he stated gravely. A noble is a creature that never reveals where their feelings truly lie. In fact, showing those feelings could be fatal for them. If a negotiation results in something less than desirable to them, they'll still bellow and brag about how it went just as planned. Anything else would be a sign of weakness, and weakness can too easily be used against you. So what I want to make clear is that I was against this, past tense. You may interpret that to mean I am now in full agreement as of the moment I signed the treaty. I was a little shocked. This was how he felt. If so, I had a feeling Viard had been aiming for this result all along. I didn't think I'd necessarily lost this battle, but it reminded me just how arduous it was to bargain with the nobility. Boy, I couldn't help but mumble, I see I have a long way to go, eh? And here I prided myself on my ability to deal with lofty nobles like you. Now I'm worried that I may lack the nerve to keep serving as head of the FNTA. No, Mjolmile, you strike me as quite a sly dealer, if I may be blunt enough to say so. Ha ha ha. I will gladly accept the compliment. I chuckled a bit, and, much to my surprise, Viard joined me. In a sincere, human sort of way, that cold exterior from before seemed like a distant memory now. So I couldn't help but risk taking just one more step. I apologize if this is too forward of me, but I hope you will hear me out, I began. Do you have any interest in working for me? The answer would probably be no. I knew that before I asked, but part of me really meant it, too. If someone as talented as Viard was part of my staff, I couldn't have asked for a better ally as we expanded into Inglesia, which was doubtless going to be an uphill battle. Ha ha ha. Ah, but look at me blurting out nonsense. You can just treat that as a joke. Well, hold on. That's actually quite an interesting offer. Oh? Viard studied my face. He didn't seem to be toying with me. You mean that? I asked. Yes. You see, I was actually considering a change of employer myself. Viard went on to give me a rundown of how things were going for Bloomond, and what he saw in its future. As he reckoned, wise people, bountiful country was a double-edged sword. It'd provide peace and prosperity for the people of Bloomond, but it could also weaken the position of the kingdom's nobility. In Bloomond, you see, the nobility do not hold vast parcels of land. In fact, numerically speaking, there are actually very few of us, perhaps 1% out of our population of 1 million. Of these, a little under 2,000 are knights, and their families add 8,000 to the total. Based on that, you can see how only a small handful of nobles are actually involved in politics, fewer than 100, in fact. Which is fine for now, but I'm quite sure that our titles will be little more than ceremonial in the not-too-distant future. That is the direction His Majesty has indicated in his plans. I see. Even a small nobility can still throw their weight around in a country of Bloomond's scope. But how could the nation so drastically reform itself while retaining the nobility's interests? I'm sure there was at least some backlash, but here they were, reinventing themselves. And are you, personally, against any of that, Viscount? No, I'm not. To me, earning a profit matters more. He grinned at me. I do think, however, that I need to find other work before I wind up unemployed. That smile told me the whole story. This had all been orchestrated from the start. Heh. Now I see what you're up to. This is your way of auditioning instead of answering my question, isn't it? I was expecting you'd see through that. Oh, I'm sure. If I hadn't, he never would have deigned to work for someone like me. So you are indeed interested? I am. I would be delighted to work for you, Mjolmile, but it would need to be strictly in an advisor role for now, if that works for you. Makes sense. He still has his noble title, so he can't make any major moves for a while yet. What I wanted most was Viard's knowledge and experience anyway, so his serving as an advisor was just fine with me. Of course it does. Thank you very much for your open-mindedness. And thank you for the offer. We defiantly smiled at each other as we shook hands. With Viard providing me his full support, the Four Nations Trade Alliance began to grow more steadily. Before long, our company would need to face off directly with the land's most powerful merchants, our biggest competitors in business. And that's what brings us to Inglesia for the first time in a while, guard? My bodyguard Beeth and I knew each other well enough by now to be on a first-name basis. He had been training in Tempest, and that had boosted his strength from a D+ to an even B in rank. He had a new set of gear as well, and I now trusted him enough that he accompanied me on all my extended business trips. Gobemon was with me as well, of course, and by this point, he looked like a battle-hardened hero, one whose presence left people awestruck. He was easily an over A in strength, and I think he had even evolved into an ogre mage on me. An ogre mage. They were the stuff of legend, I'd been told, but Tempest was positively overrun with them. It was so absurd, I just accepted it as fact lest I lose my marbles. Right you are. I have a very important meeting today, and it will bring me into, slightly dangerous territory. Oh? Sounds like you'll need me, then. Oh, come on, Gobemon. Not when he's got me right here, you know. We'll see. Now Gobemon was openly laughing at the hyper-confident Beeth. He was an ogre mage, but his skin color was the same as before. I supposed that varied from ogre to ogre. He had horns as well, but they were small enough that he could hide them with a hat or bandana. Today, he had a hat that matched the sharp business suit I'd had tailored for him. At first sight, he looked like any other hobgoblin, which made it easier for him to take his enemy by surprise. I hate to downplay Beeth too much, he's been very good to me, but he still had a ways to go. It was really Gobeman who helped me out the most as a bodyguard. So I had 2 guards with me, but today, not even that felt like quite enough. After all, I was going to meet with the merchants that more or less controlled all the Western nations. Not that I should have had cause for concern. So Rimuru, after all, knew about my plans for today. Whether our negotiations paid off or not, I knew I was as good as secure with him watching. Instead, I could sit back and be in my element, a meeting hall full of top businessmen and women from across the world, all here at my invitation. How much more exciting can it get for a man like me? And that, you see, is why I had myself and my guards dress in snappy business attire. A form of bracing ourselves for what's to come, kind of. So are we ready? Beeth and Gobeman briskly nodded, and so, stealing our resolve, we headed for the hotel hosting this conference. The automatic doors opened. "May I have your name, sir?" the man at the front desk asked with a refined, practiced gesture. "Mjolmile." My pardons, then. Just in case, would I be able to have a look at your personal identification? Not that anyone would attempt to impersonate me, but no reason not to cooperate. The hotel was being just as careful with all the other guests, I'm sure, so this was actually a relief. Will this work? Beeth took a letter of introduction out from his pocket and gave it to the hotel staff. Once everything checked out, we were patted down to ensure none of us were carrying weapons. In the midst of this, some of my employees jogged up to me. "Some Mjolmile, we've been expecting you. Everything has been set up. The meeting hall is this way." Chasing away the front desk man, my underlings guided me over to the site, a large chamber this time, suitable for noble balls and such. Quite a number of people were already there, their eyes fixed on me as I came in. "That's the head of the FNTA? The man who proposed this? He looks familiar to me. I seem to recall the particular streak of cruelty he brought to his work. I heard the man achieved his current position by currying favor with the demon lord Rimuru." "Indeed. But best not to look down on him. I heard he's at the core of all the business conducted in that monster nation. He's taking in the smaller merchants who've suffered as a result, and now he's got a decent amount of power in the region." "Humph. Who cares about some upstart like him? With the Rotso family out of the picture, I know King Doran has been positioning his kingdom for a potential comeback, but none of the other 5 elders have shown an interest in a takeover. It's over for all of them, I'm sure." "Yes, and Prince Johann of Rostia was arrested by Inglesia's magical inquisitors. Nobody else is strong enough to restore their former glories. One story I heard was that Margrave Cedra is in custody as well. Apparently he was ordered to defend Inglesia, only to wholly abandon the request. He'll be lucky to see the outside of a cell ever again, let me tell you. So whoever can seize the initiative at today's meeting can expect to wield enormous influence in the next generation, then? Heh. Not that I'll hand that throne to any of the other attendees. And especially not a mob of country folk like the 4 Nations Trade Alliance. But Tempest is nothing to trifle with. No, it is not. Their fighting power is formidable, and one of their diplomats, a talent by the name of Testarossa, has all but seized the council for her own. Well, let's just see what they bring to the table. Absolutely. If that man proves to be talentless, we can step right in and take over his position. Simple. And what demon lord wouldn't pick the most powerful candidate for the job? I'm sure this one will as well. They weren't even trying to be secretive about this. I could hear the excited rumor-mongering from all across the chamber. Everyone was intensely curious about whether I had the acumen to back up my reputation, talking loudly to ensure all their frank opinions reached my ears, and who could blame them? I had far more than Rotso's former allies here today. I even had some crime lords from around the world, each with an iron grip on their local underground mobster activities. These were the kind of people who held a monopoly on the world's fortune, the kind of lofty leaders who'd normally never confer with each other. Indeed, the kind I'd never gained an audience with back in the day. The fact they were in on rumors about the 5 elders showed just how vast their networks spread. These were the sort of people who'd spent their lives constantly outwitting and outfoxing their competition. Their greed was endless. Rotso's decline didn't scare them, they all saw it as an exciting new opportunity. I braced myself once more, I couldn't let my guard down for a moment around these guys. In the midst of this furor, someone decided to directly address me. "Well, look who's here. Mjolnir, huh? You've sure gotten too big for your britches, haven't you? Not even gonna say hello to me?" This was Alikio, bodyguard of Don Gabbana, a huge man in the prime of his life with equally huge muscles. He was clad in full-body leather armor that made him stick out like a sore thumb at this event, not that anyone dared to bring it up. They'd have been foolish to. Alikio, after all, was a retired A-ranked adventurer with such a reputation for sheer violence that nobody in organized crime wasn't aware of him. We were acquainted, of course, although given the choice, I'd have preferred never seeing him again in my life. He's like a ferocious beast, is the only way to put it, one who's constantly starving and stalking his prey. Ever since I met him as a young man, he's been constantly pestering me for food and money and such. I'd like to yell at him about it, but he's a living personification of brutality, you know? And even worse, he's got Don Gabbana behind him. A towering figure, of noble blood despite not owning a title, and someone not even the Inglesia royal family can hope to defy. When Alikio went too far one day and killed this wannabe street enforcer, the military police wrote the whole affair off as a suicide, and ever since then, nobody's even thought about crossing that maniac. I was certainly not going to rattle my saber against Alikio, not when I was supposed to be discussing economics. As the man convening this meeting, I had to weave my way through this situation, even if I came out of it looking bad. So, with a smile, I faced up to Alikio. Well, if it isn't Alikio. What a surprise to see you in a place like this. Huh? Who said you could talk to me like that? You really have gotten cocky while I wasn't paying attention, huh? Oof. Scary. Alikio wasn't raising his voice, but the sheer intimidation resonated down to the pit of my stomach. I almost wanted to pee myself, I tell you. People call me the Emperor of the Underground over in Bloomond, but faced with the real thing like this, I was reminded all over again just how low on the ladder I really am. Alikio, this is supposed to be a happy event for us all, okay? Maybe you could talk this over later. Beeth was just as awed by him. I guess he knew about Alikio, and that knowledge made him quake in his boots, not that I'm one to talk. If anything, I was impressed Beeth dared to speak to him. I don't think he ever tried opposing him in the past. Still, I can't say it was his best idea. And who the hell do you think you are? Thinking you can just step up and address me. Who gave you permission for that, huh? Now his ire was pointed squarely at my bodyguard. Just as I'd thought, Alikio had no memory of Beeth. I doubt he saw him as anyone worth remembering anyway. Someone as small-time as Beeth trying to speak to him was probably an unforgivable affront in his mind, and even if it wasn't, it certainly did little to improve his mood. Back in the day, I would have paid Alikio some coin and shooed him away. That wouldn't work today. I was the director of the Four Nations Trade Alliance, and I couldn't afford to look like a pansy around my business rivals. The people around us were just standing and smiling, nobody lifting a finger to help me. They likely saw this as an amusing diversion, but if I let it slide without comment, it would ruin my reputation with them. They'd see me as incapable of handling even this level of trouble, and oh, how they'd sneer at me afterward. I fear, Alikio, you might be laboring under some incorrect assumptions. Right now, I happen to be director of the Four Nations Trade Alliance. As we've known each other quite a while, I will be happy to let this slide, so would you mind promptly leaving my sight, please? I tried to act as composed as possible. Keeping my voice from shaking took a lot of effort, but fortunately, I managed to keep it together. What? Is this what they mean when they say you can feel murderous rage in the air? The very atmosphere seemed to change around Alikio as his gaze hardened. It was beyond terrifying. Mjolmile. Beeth was calling for me now, knees shaking as he sounded almost ready to cry. But how could I find the time to acknowledge him? I couldn't. I had to keep my eyes on Alikio no matter what. Whoa, Mjolmile, you sure you aren't making a big mistake? Or, what, you think I wouldn't lay hands upon you with all these folks around? Ooh. Well, yes, I do think that. Anyone with even a modicum of intelligence would never think of resorting to violence at a place like this. A magical beast who lived purely on instinct was one thing, but no normal, sensible person would dream of it. Besides, Alikio was Don Gabbana's personal bodyguard. If he started a fight in here, it'd cause untold strife for his boss. So I believed I was safe, but just as I did, I felt like I saw Alikio make a motion with his left hand. Huh? I thought, and then Beeth was pulled down to the ground, as Gobemon promptly stepped in front of me. One moment, it seems, was all it took for Alikio to try throwing a punch at me, and Gobemon had taken it in my place. Gobemon was the one who'd thrown Beeth aside as well. I supposed Beeth would have been in too much danger if he'd stayed there, and in fact, the concussive force of Alikio's fist had torn poor Beeth's ear right off. You all right, Beeth? Why yes, sir. Sorry couldn't help. Don't worry about it. If you die because of something like this, Soroimaru's going to be enraged. He would care about me, you think? Of course he would. And I'd be just as mad. I reached out to Beeth, helping him up, and even as we spoke, sparks were flying next to us, as Gobemon and Alikio engaged in a tenacious war of words. Were you attempting to kill him? It was an accident. I was just trying to give him a little love tap. It wound up toppling him over just because you decided to butt in. Don't give me that. He may be inexperienced, but Beeth is my brother in arms. I stood by so as not to shame him, but you went much too far. Ha ha. It's his fault for being such a pushover, ain't it? No weapons are allowed in here anyway, you know. What kind of bum dies after getting jostled a little bit, huh? Oh? I think the air's shifting around Gobemon, too. Now I was concerned we weren't going to hold a business meeting at all, but the next moment, Don Gabbana strode in, as if on cue. Alikio, what are you doing? Oops. Sorry, boss. I was just saying hello to an old acquaintance of mine. You were? But isn't that man over there hurt? Here, use this. What a farce. The bad guy kicking up the dust, and the good guy swooping in to calm things down. Gabbana's trying to make me owe him a favor, ain't he? And keeping my head underwater all the while, I might add. Alikio, no doubt having picked up on this, sprinkled the healing potion on Beeth without further complaint. That was bound to leave a stain on his suit, but, whoa, it immediately repaired his ear. Only a full potion could have been that effective. Oh. Just imagine, using an invaluable full potion on someone that low-born. Sir Gabbana never fails to amaze. Why, I suppose even a secret elixir worth a fortune in itself is a trifling matter to him. Indeed. With Alikio's muscle and Gabbana's riches, they make a practically invincible team, no? Hearing all this chit-chat from the gallery was doing little to lift my spirits. I felt a pall over my mind. Things had suddenly grown very ominous, like I had just awoken from a nightmare. I shot a glance at Beeth, and he was frozen in place. I could only guess he felt the same way I did. I mean, come on. We had grown used to having full potions around, mind you. Whenever Beeth had some spare time, he'd go up to Gobemon and ask for a little training, and I couldn't tell you how many arms and legs he might lose in the process, in a single day, no less. No way he'd be alive without our full potions. Thanks to that, we couldn't imagine life without these potions, really. Only when I overheard the conversation around me did I realize all over again just how lucky we really were. Ah, and look. Look at the shining badge on Gabbana's breast. Yes, I can see it, too. That seal on it is glowing a little. It is. That means it's made of real magisteel, you know. No doubt about it. It's just like the rumors say. That up-and-coming group, absorbing one criminal mob after another. That's who that seal belongs to. Pulled in by the appreciative crowd, I stole a look at Don Gabbana. What I saw shocked me. There, shining on his left breast, was a familiar coat of arms, 3 snakes intertwined with each other. How would I not recognize it? We only spent 3 bloody days bickering over its design. I think Sir Rimuru kicked it off by saying, "Why don't we go with snakes? Better to keep it simple, I'd say, instead of bothering with dragons and whatnot. Snakes symbolize knowledge, and greed, and eternity and stuff, so it'd be perfect for Reg." Then Big Mama countered with "That's right, and snakes can signify drunkenness as well, which we certainly identify with," and then I was all wah ha 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 ha. In that case, let's have 3 entwined snakes, all entangled like we are after the 8th refill. Yes, this was clearly the seal of Reg, and while I didn't know all our employees personally, should I have taken this to believe that Reg had absorbed Don Gabbana's group? Instantly, I felt like a fool for acting so scared. This was a chance, not a threat. I could use old Gabbana here as a foil to show people exactly what sort of position I was in. You, I believe, are president of the Gabbana Merchant Group, right? How do you intend to atone for this incident? Pardon me? Ah, you're oblivious to the facts, then? You gravely injured one of my bodyguards. Beeth here, you see, refused to play along with that rabble-rouser because this is meant to be a serious business meeting, and look what your man did in response. What did you call me? Heh heh heh. This is so wonderful. Both servant and master were befuddled by my return salvo. Who's that man daring to defy Gabbana? He's affiliated with Reg, you know, that shadowy group. That's right. And I hear Reg's even brought a certain well-known armed group into its fold. But look at this man. He's certainly in a hurry to die, I assume. Or does he have something up his sleeve? Are you telling me this 4 nations trade alliance has the power to openly compete with Reg? Our audience was getting on my nerves, but being the center of attention wasn't a bad thing for me right now. Not that I had time to bask in it. You're a dead man. Hold on, Alakio, hold on. Not here. Besides, there's no fun in merely killing anyone. If you say so, boss. I'll tackle him later. Better do something about these 2 men threatening me before handling anything else. Quiet, all of you, I shouted, my voice smooth as butter, not quavering at all. I could sense that I was back in my element. It hardly seemed believable that I'd feared Alakio a moment ago. I mean, I spend all day discussing matters with people, and monsters, actually, mostly monsters, far scarier than this. Don Gabbana would seem like less than a flea to Sir Veldora. He could release just a little bit of his aura, and the man would be a pile of dust. Perhaps Alakio could withstand that, but it'd still be no competition. Anyone who even thought about bringing harm to Sir Veldora would immediately cease to exist. That's how scary he is, and I deal with him on a near-daily basis. I've even put my foot down with him, steadfastly refusing his requests for a raise in allowance. Besides, the town I now call home is practically crawling with magic-born rated a calamity level threat or higher, and I'm managing all their finances, aren't I? Here they were, these titans who could single-handedly level a smaller kingdom, and they were sheepishly plodding out of my office after I yelled at them for demanding a budget increase. That's what my regular life has become. This reminded me of a chat I had with Sienna Fair a while ago. I tell you, Testarosa's talented, she works fast, and she couldn't be more help to me. Beautiful, too. I'm rather jealous of you, Sian. Huh? Oh my. Ha ha ha. You're a very funny person, Jolmal. I haven't laughed this hard in a while. That was a hearty laugh, considering how calm and level-headed he usually was. After that, we managed to strike up a friendship for whatever reason, enough so that we'd go out for drinks now and again. The way he put it, Testarossa was a truly fearsome demon. I suppose she doesn't let on much with me, she's usually so elegant, with that lovely soft smile, so I never thought of her as scary at all. But I knew all about the events leading up to her takeover of the council, so I always tried to be prudent in my behavior. Sexual harassment is a crime. That's one of our office's slogans, you know. Regardless, I say all this to show that I have numerous kinds of crazy and amazing people constantly knocking on my door. Now that I'd recalled that, I had no reason at all to fear Don Gabbana or Alikio. You damned. Both of them were fuming, faces red with fury, but I couldn't have cared less. And I think even Beeve was picking up on this reality, too. Hey, look, Jolmile's too much of a gentleman to say it, so let me spell it out for you. You better not talk to him like that, okay? Because I'm one thing, but he's the sort of person you'd never dream of speaking to that way. Look at him, egging them on. But the entire room's eyes were on us now. We had the perfect stage. Let's take Don Gabbana down and establish exactly where I stand around here. I flashed the room a bold smile. I'm not exactly useful in a fight, but I get a lot of compliments about how threatening I can make myself look. Yes, Beeve is exactly right. Perhaps I shouldn't have let things slide at first. Indeed, perhaps I should have given you the discipline you needed from the start. You're absolutely correct, Jolmile. Then I wouldn't have had to take his abuse and get my sodden ear talked off. Indeed, sorry about that. So, again, how should we settle this, Beeve? How about we start by receiving an apology, huh? Maybe we can reconsider if they show us the right attitude. Fair point, yes. So, Alikio and Gabbana, if you apologize right now, I will pretend none of this happened. But if you insist on stirring the pot with me, well, that changes things, doesn't it? Because by my name as Garden Jolmile, Finance Minister of the Jura Tempest Federation and Director of the Four Nations Trade Alliance, I promise you that I'm not afraid to fight. So what'll it be, you two? I tried to grandstand as much as possible. Their faces stiffened. God damn you. Hold on, Alikio. Calm down. I think there might be a misunderstanding at work here, but if we did something to anger you, I will gladly apologize. You said your name was Guard? Guard? I mean, Sam Jolmile. Don Gabbana didn't like being corrected like this one bit. But so what? I'd already beaten him. This meeting hall was full of powerful merchants, supporting the financial fortunes of Inglesia and many other nations, and now, in front of all these power brokers, Don Gabbana had to acknowledge who I was. I suppose he expected me to back down long ago, but he'd have to be disappointed. He was staring me down, his snake-like eyes full of murderous rage, but I wasn't scared in the slightest. The old me might have given him a tearful apology, but I've grown since then, haven't I? Very good. So what am I misunderstanding, exactly? I tried throwing Don Gabbana a life raft. He responded by bowing his head, exposing the throbbing blue veins on his temples. It seems my bodyguard was out of line with you, causing you trouble. I think he was a little too excited for his own good, so if you could overlook his behavior for me. Pardon. You think you can just smile and say sorry after seriously injuring someone? My man Beeve here suffered the shame of having his ear torn off, you realize? Yes, and I provided a potion so he... Ha! I tried to scoff as loudly as I could. And you think that cheap drug can smooth all this over? That tells me all I need to know about you. So Rimuru, worrywart that he is, provides me with enough full potions that I actually carry several on my person as a habit. They were cheap to me, that much was no lie, so I kept going on the offensive. Indeed, if that's all the talent you have, I don't think you have what it takes to join the vast project I plan to propose. Leave this chamber at once. My thunderous voice made Don Gabbana wince. Then, in a cold, penetrating voice, he rumbled, I hope you don't regret this softly, so only I heard it, and took Alikio out of the meeting hall. Complete victory was mine. The hall was deathly quiet, but the moment Don Gabbana disappeared from sight, cheers erupted, some for me, some not as much. The common sentiment, I'm sure, was that nobody expected someone like me to kick Don Gabbana out of this event. While I had people's attention, and momentum was on my side, I decided to go right into my opening statement. I followed it by revealing the make Bloom and a logistical hub plan Sir Raimuru and Vayard had discussed with me, successfully earning the interest of most of the audience. Interest, yes, but I didn't expect anyone to volunteer to join our plan right this moment. The reason was simple. I had just picked a fight with Don Gabbana, one of Reg's most public faces, and I'm sure they all expected a hitman would rub me out soon enough. If the main organizer was gone, well, they could all aim to become his successor afterward, and besides, if the core of this plan was no longer breathing, the entire project itself was in danger of collapsing. It was nothing the merchants here would jump into that easily, I suppose. But that actually worked in my favor. Simply surviving today built people's trust in me, after all. Plus, I was publicly pitting myself against the Reg, and given that I was the G in that acronym, victory was all but guaranteed. So I gave them my pitch as fervently as I could, and saw my audience react with just the kind of excited enthusiasm I was hoping for. The next morning, as we left our hotel, we spotted a carriage parked nearby, painted entirely black. Pretty gutsy move. This was a public place, you know. Get in, Alikio growled at us. I grinned back at him as I climbed up, Beeth and Gobemon leading the way. You sure got guts, you know that? He said, blustering as he hopped in last, but he sounded like nothing but a sore loser to me. So where are we going? Somewhere good. Enjoy the trip. It'll be your last. Alikio said no more to me after that, so I followed his lead as the wagon clattered on. We reached our destination after around 20 minutes. Judging by the distance from the hotel, we were likely in the city's more affluent neighborhood, just as I thought. I breathed a sigh of relief. If I had been taken into Don Gabbana's territory, that would have been cause for at least a little distress, but now there was nothing to fret about. No, we were at the location the Sons of the Veldt used as their Inglesia headquarters. I had assisted with its renovation, so I knew the site well. Okay, get out. You've got people more fearsome than you could imagine waiting for you. I can't wait to see you piss your pants as you grovel for your life before them. I turned a piteous eye on the ranting Alikio. Honestly, I felt a little bad for him. Hold on, you. Why are you looking at me like that? Well, fine, I'll tell you. After all, it'd be over for him soon. After all what, you bastard? What are you talking about? Even Alikio had sensed something off about my attitude. I saw a little bit of concern on his face, even. Several men were milling about in front of the building before us. They ran up when the carriage stopped. Alikio, one of them said, I have a message. What? We have some pretty high leadership waiting down below. High leadership? The Seven Blades? No, higher. Don't tell me the elders from the Sage Cabal are here? Or the shadow forces of the Darksky Horde? These leaders are serving as guides. The three bosses, then? Alikio sounded pretty surprised, but I had never heard of any of these groups, so I couldn't imagine who they referred to. I inferred they were all part of the Gabbana family, and probably new recruits, too. Not even I have a full grasp of all the groups Reg now has under its umbrella, which is partly why we end up with unhappy events like these. But it's not like the Western nations had this many powerful gangs in the first place. We've already guided Gabbana inside. Right. Let's go. So Alikio, looking more tense than before, took us into the building. We were going into the basement, and it was actually quite luxurious down there. The Sons of the Veldt used to have an altar, but we took all that out and converted it into an audience room. Sir Raimuru wanted a place with a lot of atmosphere, something befitting a shadowy secret cabal, and so we made no compromises on any little detail. This may even be fancier than the chamber Sir Raimuru uses in Tempest to receive his finest guests. As that nation's budgetary overseer, It's my job to ensure we're not wasting vast sums of money, but as Reg, we're just a bunch of criminals, and we can use our filthy lucre any darn way we like. And why are you so calm right now? Alikio asked, perhaps a tad anxious. Well, who knows? I replied. He clicked his tongue at that and said no more as we proceeded 3 floors down, finding ourselves in front of a large door. Come in. Vegan? Of the 7 blades? You're guarding the door? PFFT. Alikio, eh? I used to respect you, you know. I even thought about recommending you for a position in the blades the next time we had an opening. Damn idiot. What? Vegan? What did I? Just get your sorry hide in here. Vegan glared at Alikio's servants. And all of you, wait here for me. I'm only letting Alikio and our guests in. That was valid. Best to keep the number of people who knew I was one of the bosses to a minimum. I silently followed his orders. Here we go, Alikio said as he came in, the rest of us following. Vegan joined us at the rear, closing the door behind him. This door was magically enhanced, ensuring no conversations leaked out of this room. No matter what happened in here, no one on the outside would ever know. Despite being so deep down, the room was filled with dazzling light, the flames from an untold number of candles dancing around us. The candles were key, so Rimuru insisted, even if magic would be far easier. That kind of extravagance, he said, only adds to the allure. There were no real dividing walls down here, so it was more of a vast chamber than a room, really. That was why it could work as an audience chamber, but as a rule, only our top leaders ever went inside, in other words, the sort of people who knew my real identity. Right now, though, over half of the people occupying this chamber were unfamiliar to me. There were nearly 100 of these leaders, and they all kept their gazes on me as I strode into the chamber. Hey! Alikio shouted to stop me. I ignored him. He attempted to place a hand on my shoulder, but Vegan kicked it away even before Beeth and Gobeman could act. I suppose he had been briefed on me when he was assigned door guard duty. The reaction from the management I didn't know ran the gamut. Some were surprised, while others looked simply befuddled. The leaders I did know all promptly took a knee in reverence, and seeing that must have made the truth dawn on the others, because they quickly followed suit. No. Mjolmile is one of our bosses? Don Gabbana's flustered yell rang across the quiet chamber. We kept the air cool down here, but with us being in such a vast underground room, his voice had an echo to it. Apparently he had just been delivering a speech to some of the people here, people I knew well. No doubt he'd been trying to convince them to kill me as a lesson, in order to show the 4 Nations Trade Alliance exactly where it stood with him. That's right. The man you've just spent this entire time impassionately pleading with us to kill is one of our very own head honchos. He was answered not by me, but by a figure in an eye-catching, revealing dress. This was Glenda Atlee, an extremely talented woman who posed as the Reg boss in our place, and what she just said confirmed all my suspicions about Gabbana. Funny how it seemed like they were talking about someone else, though, not me. Chica? The normally composed Don Gabbana could barely remain upright. Once upon a time he was a godlike figure to me. I never thought I'd witness him in such a sad state. Well done, Glenda. Thanks to you, everything's going well with our project. Our conference yesterday was a smashing success. Thank you very much for the compliment, boss. If you could bring my merit points into consideration as well. Certainly, certainly. I'll provide you with double the usual. Well, how kind of you. I'm glad you're so understanding. Glenda guided me toward the platform that used to house the altar. We had 3 seats in a row up there, and I sat myself down on one of them. But after seeing Glenda's reaction to me, nobody in the room voiced any concern about me being their boss. That's how much they all feared her, I suppose. And now, before my eyes, Don Gabbana and Alikio were being held down, ready to be whisked away to their fates. One of them had publicly voiced a desire to have a boss killed, the other had treated me with the most abject of rudeness, and now we needed to figure out what to do with them. The other leaders were apparently unanimous in their agreement that the two of them should receive the death penalty. There is no way to compensate for this arrogance except through death. We'd better not kill them quickly, either. Let's torture them for a week first, to teach any other disloyal members a lesson. Yeah. Sacrificing them to a demon could be interesting. That, or using their corpses to create a chimera. You'll recall how that man so gleefully described all the ways we could kill our own boss. Why don't we try them on him instead, I say? It was a downright brutal conversation, let me tell you. The color drained from Don Gabbana's face, his breathing growing ragged. I could see a wet spot in his pants, but I pretended that I didn't. Alikio wasn't looking much better. I was sure, now that he'd realized his impending doom, he was trying to work out whether to attempt resistance. But we had the strongest of underground leaders in this room. If I'd been alone, he could certainly have killed me in a few seconds, but many of these other leaders were formidable fighters in their own right. It'd be impossible to overpower all of them. He stood no chance against Glenda alone, in fact. Enthusiasm grew in the chamber as the leaders tried outdoing themselves with new and innovative torture methods. What should I do now, then? I pondered the question as I looked at the downtrodden duo in front of me. Honestly, both of them had made serious errors, but I wouldn't have called them guilty of a crime. Acting macho and browbeating some new organization horning in on your turf is part and parcel of being a mobster. Being so openly defiant against the man who runs your group is a problem, but how could he have known when he had no idea who I am? And that attack on Beeve was infuriating, but even that all got worked out with no permanent consequences. So Rimuru was aware of the conference I organized, besides, and I'm sure he had someone there watching us to ensure nothing serious happened. In fact, several of CI's troops were stationed in the room right now. If things really went awry, I was confident it would be stopped at once before anyone was truly in danger. Along those lines, I was starting to think capital punishment for Don Gabbana and Alikio was going too far. Order. I quieted down the room, now that I'd collected my thoughts. They will not be punished. Gabbana is no traitor to our organization, he simply didn't know I was the boss. If he betrays our trust in him again, that is a different matter, but I am going to overlook this particular event. I was still annoyed about a lot of things, but I needed to restrain myself. That was my decision, but not everyone was for it. You're being too lenient. It'd be a terrible precedent to set. This was greeted with applause from many people. Boss, one of the extremists in the room said, don't tell me you're an amateur in this field. Because to lifers like us, saving face is more important than almost anything else. If you let people screw around with you like this, nobody's gonna want to serve you any longer. Indeed, some of the group were starting to openly question my authority. I didn't mind dissatisfaction about the decisions I made, but I really couldn't have this. Whoever said that just now, come forward. A young man took a step toward me, a fearless look on his face. This is Yang from the Black Nails. We fought together in the same mercenary army before, and I can affirm that he's a stern, severe man who never shows mercy to his enemies. He is talented as well, equivalent to an A in rank. This was Girard filling me in. He was the leader of the Sons of the Veldt, and somewhere along the line, he'd taken position next to me here. Smart fellow. I nodded at him and turned to the man before me. Your name is Yang, then? Yeah. And you call me an amateur? Am I wrong? Because if you show mercy that readily, in this business, you think I'm letting people screw with me? Again, am I wrong? Good grief. Does Yang realize how much contempt he's showing with every remark? Well, maybe he does. Maybe he's using this chance to plant seeds of doubt in everybody's minds so he can stage a coup someday. They say that those without power can never thrive in the darkness, that you have to constantly show your strength, lest someone dethrone you, but I didn't want Reg to become that kind of company. I needed to explain reality to him, and fast. Who's screwing with me? Huh? I'm asking you who could beat me, Yang. Do you think you could? No. Yang shot a glance at Glenda. I guess it was she, and not the sons of the Veld, who had taken down the black nails. You said saving face is important. Shouldn't you be taking responsibility for addressing me with such contempt? Glenda, I take back what I said about your merit points earlier. Oh, come on. Silence. Because it's become clear to me that Yang's far from the only one of you failing to treat your boss with respect. You have no right to criticize Gabbana at all. Don Gabbana and Alikio gave me surprised looks. That made something else click in my mind. Were they being used? Glenda, you've been putting ideas into their heads, haven't you? Setting things up so someone would challenge me to try giving themselves a boost. Oh, you noticed? Of course I did. And you should be glad it was me here. If it was one of the other bosses, we'd have some serious problems. No problems at all. I already discussed this matter with Lady Elmesia. She advised me to proceed and hide it from you. Oh. Big Mama's mean streak can cause me so much trouble sometimes. Things were working out well with this in the end, but still. Yang, I'd love to meet the person who tries screwing with me just because I'm letting Gabbana off the hook. That applies to all of you here. I'm not going to demand that you stop thinking about overthrowing me, but you better be ready for the consequences. I might be too weak to survive any attempts on my life, but let me make this clear, if I go, all of Reg goes. I meant this as a clear warning. It made Yang visibly shiver. I wasn't bragging or bluffing, he knew. It was the honest truth. So, does this mean the other two bosses are? You don't need to know. You said it. Why are you so keen on learning things? People get killed for knowing too much. Jiraiya and Glenda answered before I could. It silenced the other leaders, who had sweat dripping down their brows. I decided to give it one final push. Now. I will not try Gabbana and his bodyguard, and I assume none of you have complaints about this? Let me hear you. No, sir. They all bowed before me, showing their allegiance. Well, Yang, you should rejoice. I'll let your insolence go this time, but you won't receive another chance. Of course. Thank you very much. I promise I will work harder than ever to repay the favor. You will? Good. That's the kind of spirit I like to see, I smiled, satisfied. I was now confident in my full control of Reg, and based on this experience, I decided to enact a core set of regulations for our firm. 1. Do not betray your friends. 2. Be gracious enough to forgive the mistakes of others. 3. Do not punch down or bring misfortune upon anyone. Those 3 should suffice. Not betraying your friends went without saying. We would sentence anyone who broke that one to death. Forgiving others' mistakes was trickier, but we were positioning Reg as a last resort for people who were down on their luck. We weren't gonna receive the cream of the crop, in other words, so I was asking our people on the ground to try and make up for any errors. Nothing was going to change unless the higher-ups carried out systematic reform, and I wanted to get this nailed down now, while all the top managerial staff were in one place. Finally, rule number 3 was the most important one. Reg was going to be an amalgamation of all the big forces in organized crime, but if we constantly tried pulling each other down, we'd never be able to take on our public merchant competition. I'm sure some people had made a lot of money with that approach, but going forward, it was completely prohibited. I wanted everyone here to realize that we wielded far more influence than before, and that meant we had to contribute to society in a fair way. We weren't a lawless mob, we were a chivalrous group, one that helped the weak and crushed the powerful. That was my wish, and it was Sir Rimuru too. Given our underground position, we certainly couldn't whitewash everything we got involved in like that, but I didn't want us to abandon our pride. If the top management is corrupt, the guys at the bottom have no way to defy them. That applied to me as well, and I wanted to be sure I didn't forget it. I know it's hard to change your ways immediately, I said to wrap things up, but you should see these as the rules Reg expects you to follow. Give our younger kids time to learn. They need to know there's more than one way to survive out there. The leaders meekly pondered this. They were used to doing all kinds of dirty things. It was impossible for them to change their thought processes that quickly. But with the right use of really, Sir Rimourou's, authority, I didn't think it was impossible. I suppose this is silencing the opposition with my power, but I'm dealing with people who believe that power is everything, so I think it's the right move to make. Hopefully it'll help foster change in everyone else, too. So the Gabbana family was set to be dismantled, its members reassigned to other organizations. Gabbana would be treated as my personal advisor. He'd work at our Bloomond headquarters under a different identity. He was good with financial matters and certainly talented in other ways as well, so I'd hate to leave him idle. I decided to let him oversee our Magitrain project, which was a constant, aggravating thorn in my side. It's really Sir Rimourou's fault, you know, he's at the core of it all. He comes up with these wild ideas, and then he pushes me to implement them. And that's fine. It's my job, and I won't deny that it's an attractive project to work on. But he really needs to remember that I've only got 2 hands. I'm an average human being, not at all like him. I need to sleep at night. It's hard to turn him down whenever he says, "It's all yours, Molly," to me, but when I call off a project due to budget concerns, it's often for the sake of my own health. Of course, with this much money on the line, that excuse is gonna stop working pretty fast, and that's why recruiting Gabbana was a stroke of luck for me. Gabbana, by the way, complained to me on a daily basis. "Damn it," he'd grumble, "I'm thankful for this, but look at all the work you've allowed to pile up in here." I had no idea it would be this much of a trial, said work was all stuff Sir Rimouroux had irrationally demanded from me, so I really wished he'd complain to Sir Rimouroux, not me. I did feel just a tad guilty, though, so I took measures to ensure he was generously compensated for the job. As for Alikio, I left him in the hands of Gobemon. The ogre mage himself requested this. He wanted to settle matters with Alikio, apparently, after the whole thing with Beeth. So we arranged a fight, one that Alikio had no right to refuse, but I dangled a chance at upper management in his face to sweeten the deal. It ended, as you'd expect, with Gobemon dominating. Do you understand now? You're always going to find someone stronger than you. And even I would be considered merely above average in my homeland. Strength is not something to show off, it is hidden within your heart. It must be used for just causes, to protect the things you must never give up. That is what I was taught, and it is not too late for you, either. You ought to take this moment to reevaluate yourself. I'd like to think that speech, plus the trouncing he received, opened Alikio's eyes a little. And I was right. Soon he was volunteering to serve next to Gobemon. So things ended rather quietly for the 2 men who'd tried picking a fight with me. But we announced something quite different to the general public. We needed to leverage Reg to give the 4 Nations Trade Alliance the flashiest debut possible, but we also needed to find some happy compromise to keep Reg from losing face in the process. Thus, for starters, we took the mansion we had purchased to serve as the FNTA's Inglesia branch and blew it to cinders. All the staff was evacuated in advance, but the fallout led to a lot of gossip among the general public. That, and the journalists Diablo introduced me to wrote some truly wonderful coverage for us. They portrayed Reg as this fearsome, ominous entity, while singing my praises as someone who can't be intimidated. And why would I bow to mob activity like this? I'm the finance minister of Tempest, for goodness sake. The breakup of the Gabbana family made for big headlines as well, and between all the coverage, I think we got across to people that the FNTA's a lot bigger than they thought. On top of that, we spread rumors that Reg and the FNTA had declared a truce to rest and regroup their forces. This theory came to be generally accepted by the public, and with that, the whole thing was over. So that was how we safely got the FNTA off the ground, but looking at the earnings reports from our branches, even I was left speechless. Between you and me, these branches were earning the equivalent of several dozen gold coins an hour, more than my yearly salary as a Tempest minister in the space of one day, I suppose. In the eyes of the public, I was earning more in an hour than most of them could expect to make all year. By the way, we also gave Benimaru and CI payment for their services helping Reg, I think around 50 gold coins per month. CI's agents working directly for Reg were earning vast amounts more, though, and all their necessary expenses were covered, too. The same went for Glenda and Girard, the people we had posing as bosses. A boss needs a lavish lifestyle, after all, or else their associates will get suspicious. Finally, we also received compensation from our respective governments. Essentially, Big Mama, Soraimuru, and myself were each entitled to 2% of the profits. This was paid yearly, but even now, my account was growing at a shocking pace. I consider myself a lucky man, yes, but this lucky? It's all so scarily unreal to me. But my ambitions don't end here. I've got big dreams, you know. I'm not about to stay satisfied with these little successes. My name is Garden Jolmile, the man whose destiny was changed after I met Soraimuru. I want to run hard, climbing as high as I can my whole life, so that I have no regrets later on. And until death finally visits me in the end, I'm never going to stop trying. Chapter 2, Faraway Memories. The first place Vielgrind set foot in was a rift in faraway space. Exactly where, she didn't know, but she was unbound by the limitations of time, giving her a chance to face up to herself. That enabled her to fully make her ultimate skill, Cthugha, Lord of the Fire God, her own. Cthugha included the ability to trace the soul of Ludora. To be exact, it could track down the location of any object its master specified. Using that ability, Vielgrind was able to discover the pieces of her beloved Ludora's soul, no matter how far away they were, even beyond time and space. After that, all she needed was a way to jump toward them. This was provided by Dimensional Leap, the complete, full combination of control dimensions and transdimensional leap, made possible only by the powers of an ultimate skill that far transcended most others of its kind. However, not even this skill could calculate the exact coordinates of the destination, making it impossible to leap to the time and place of one's choice. That took extra targeting, but if one was leaping within the same timeline, that ceased to be an issue. In fact, Dimensional Leap even let the user travel any distance in an instant, making de facto teleportation a reality. So Vielgrind relied on this ability to chase after Ludora. The first place she came to was a large landmass on one planet or another, a location where civilization was only beginning to form. Here was the leader of a tribe of dark-skinned people, a man with blonde hair, still young. This man housed a piece of Ludora's soul within him. This band of hunter-gatherers had, over time, built a permanent home for themselves in the basin of a large river. Vielgrind didn't hesitate for one moment to help them, conjuring rain and taming the river in order to create a bountiful land. The people began to practice agriculture, doing away with hunting exclusively. Their food situation vastly improved, letting them feed more mouths than before. Their small settlement grew into a town, one that struck fear into the other villages around them. It was inevitable that the blessed would face foreign threats in time. So Vielgrind prepared her next move. She gave them a furnace, one hardy enough to melt metal, a very out-of-place piece of technology in this world. The young man and his tribe jumped straight from stone tools to bronzeware, finding themselves gifted with tools and weapons of iron. Swallowing up the nearby villages, the tribe grew until it became a kingdom. The throne was passed down to the king's son, and then his grandson. Vielgrind stopped directly aiding the kingdom at this point, preferring instead to sit back and nestle up to the person she loved so much. No matter how much she was asked, she never exercised her skills for the kingdom's sake. Because that was what her beloved wanted. If I were you, I'd make them owe me far more than they could ever pay back. But no, I don't need any more than this. If I retire from the throne, it'll be far too much power for those fools to handle. Yes. I understand fully, Ludora. The king's sons and grandsons had no soul fragments within them, so Vielgrind had no reason to give them aid. She could have done it on a whim anyway, but the king wanted his descendants not to be dependent on anyone else, and Vielgrind intended to respect that. PFFT. My name's Ludora again, huh? Great. As long as you love someone else, well, no wonder you give me the cold shoulder. He. Jealous? That's so cute. Ah, shut up. I have this first-rate woman in front of me, too. It's like being stuck in eternal limbo. Just as he'd said, the man, who'd gone from a tribal chief to the first king of Arcia, a riverside pioneer in civilization, never enjoyed a romantic relationship with Veilgrind, despite treating her as a goddess. Veilgrind was fine with that. Her job, she thought, was to oversee things. All she needed to do was wait for lovers to have children, pass down their bloodlines, and for one of them to have a piece of Ludora's soul. That was how she lived her life. An age of development evolved into an age of prosperity. Happy times passed all too quickly. The young man grew old, was robbed of his faculties, and soon the day came when he was simply waiting for death to arrive. I've led a happy life, my goddess. You called me your husband, but have I lived up to the role well enough? Yes, you did. I was happy. Ah. I'm relieved to hear that. May you be eternally blessed. Those were the great king's final words, and then his silent voice handed over his soul to Veilgrind. She had the soul fragment she wanted, but this was a tiny, tiny piece. The journey had only begun, and so Veilgrind took her next leap. The kingdom continued to swallow up the nations around it, growing into an empire. Those left behind wrote historical records for later generations, and thus, mythology was born. And in the lands of the Holy Arcian Empire, ruled by members of the young man's bloodline, Veilgrind the fire-wielding creator-goddess was worshipped for years and years to come. Veilgrind went through a cycle of encounters and partings. Through them, she came to understand that Veldenava had created more than one world. Many of them, in fact. A single world was self-enclosed, there was no such thing as parallel worlds, but there were so-called other worlds, residing in alternate dimensions. That much Veilgrind already knew thanks to the otherworlders she had met, but she hadn't imagined the sheer number of other worlds out there, and their sheer diversity. They could run on completely different laws, or be unbound by the rules of karma. Indeed, a wealth of civilizations could intermix in the physical worlds contained within vast spiritual realms. They could look familiar, all magic and sword fighting, or they could be bereft of magicules and locked away from all types of spells. Civilizations could be driven by a thing called science, and some of the less common realms featured human beings transformed into machines. Some worlds were small enough that a fully unleashed true dragon could wipe them from existence, others were wastelands, fought over constantly by angels and demons with the powers of awakened demon lords. Veilgrind traversed all of them, but not by her own free will, rather, she simply took the path she was guided to. They were all at differing levels of civilization, if they had any at all, and she couldn't conjecture what dimension they were in, or what timeline. No parallel worlds overlapped each other in the universe, so there were never duplicates of the same existence within the same timeline. In other words, just because she'd gone somewhere once didn't mean that she could revisit it at any time. She could produce accurate spacetime coordinates for herself within a single given timeline in the dimension she existed in, but that was simply the point where she existed at that moment in time, and not even Cthulhu's dimensional leap ability let her make precise jumps. As a result, the knowledge Veilgrind possessed consisted of all memories of all Ludoras in all worlds. There was a fleet commander serving a galactic empire. In a more magic-oriented world, there was the vizier of a small kingdom. In a magic-less realm, there was a globe-trotting swindler. In a civilized world, there was a scientist living in poverty. Veilgrind would often be called toward people bearing pieces of Ludora's soul at a moment when they encountered considerable danger. Only when they were staring death in the face would their soul emit the necessary shine. She wasn't always on time, sometimes they died as children. These were very sad scenes, but Veilgrind accepted them, chalking them up to fate. Such tragedies, besides, let her gather the victim's soul fragment more quickly, so she saw no need to weep for them. Despite this, she never tried to accelerate the march of time with her abilities. Watching over all these disparate Ludoras was how Veilgrind found happiness in life. She discovered early on that the bloodlines of these Ludoras didn't matter much. There was no pattern to their appearance, either, one would have black hair, the next red. But in Veilgrind's eyes, all of them were Ludora. So she spent untold numbers of years living this way. The number of soul fragments grew and grew, slowly regaining their beautiful whole. Veelgrind could instinctively sense that only a very few remained, either the next one, or the one after that, would be the last. So she kept on leaping, going wherever she was called. Here was an empire, and after her latest spacetime voyage, Veelgrind appeared in an ornate chamber. Silk robes appeared to be the standard clothing in this era, in deep blue hues, which suited her well. Now Veelgrind regarded the other man in the room, the Empire's wizened emperor. "Who are you?" The emperor had lost his stamina to old age. He was lying down on a large, magnificent bed, and having this strange woman appear suddenly in their bedchamber would have surprised anyone. The fact he hadn't screamed in terror indicated that much of his courage, at least, remained intact. But Veelgrind paid him little mind. "Oh, it's an old man again, is it? Ah, that brings me back. That look reminds me of that tribal chief." To her, old age didn't matter. It was just one of the many forms human beings took, an indication of their physical status. So she affectionately reached out to the old man's cheek, bringing her lips close to his ear. "Veelgrind. That is my name. What's yours?" "Humph. You do not fear me. And your power? Is it divinity?" A sword had been thrust against Veelgrind's throat. She blocked it with a single wispy finger, not bothering to even move her eyes. Not a single drop of blood was shed, the demon-destroying strike was fruitless. The attack hadn't come from the Emperor, of course, but one of the guardians attending to him. His name was Jensei Akari, and as the Imperial Guardian who protected the land from man-eating fiends and evil spirits, he bore a blade with the power to dispel evil. He was the best swordsman of the present age, the current master of the sword style known as Oboro Shinmei Ryu. Still in his early 30s, he had been named Guardian of the Emperor despite his youth. But not even Jensei's blade could hurt Veelgrind. The reason why might have been obvious, but to Jensei, it was beyond the realm of comprehension. "I never thought my blade would be stopped. Minamoto, guard His Majesty for me." "Yes, sir." Jensei was speaking to Saburo Minamoto, a man in his early 20s. Much like Jensei, he was guarding the Emperor from the shadows. He was a talented student who was third ranked among Jensei's pupils. "Oh, you don't need to be that wary of me. I'm sure you're both masters of your technique, but to me, it's more cute than anything." "Nonsense. Perhaps I can't stack up to you, but I will at least earn us some more time." "Perhaps so." She shrugged. "I'm sure asking for your trust is a bit much yet. But all right. Can you just keep him here for me, please?" She didn't mind being maligned, but if it led to a greater burden on the Emperor, she wouldn't stand for it. By her estimation, His Majesty had only a short time left, and she couldn't bear the thought of her presence causing that last ember to be extinguished. At the very least, she wanted to care for him in his last moments, bringing tranquility to them. It was Minamoto who suffered the worst in all this. Just one glance from Veelgrind, and he was frozen to the spot. The sheer dominance in that gaze made him realize the insurmountable difference in their skill. Actually, things went even beyond that. They now understood that this was something completely inscrutable, a foe that made all the demons and mystic beasts they'd engaged in the past seem like children. If Jensei's sword, a blade he held the utmost of respect for, had failed, Veelgrind was clearly no one to trifle with. But even that was failing to fully grasp the situation. Minamoto was frustrated. He had a duty, and there was no way to fulfill it. Still, he at least tried to summon what little metal he had left to glare at Veelgrind. "Are you one of the Yoma leaders, then? Striding forth yourself to put an end to all this squabbling?" A great deal of lip flapping to hide the cold sweat. He hoped to at least uncover the identity of this assailant, but Veelgrind understood that well enough. "You call them Yoma here? They exist in this world, too, then? You really do find them lurking everywhere, don't you? Are you saying you're not?" "That's right. Besides, the Yoma you speak of, I can't be sure they're the same as the creatures I know. Veelgrind could instantly analyze any language from any world and speak it fluently back at its people. This wasn't dependent on any skill of hers, it was more of a latent bodily function, reading the thoughts that bounced between people in this world. But since similar concepts could sometimes be mixed up, she needed to carefully avoid making any mistakes. The term Yoma needed to be addressed, she thought. In her mind the term translated directly to mystic, and the mystics she knew were the ones led by Feldway, the mystic lord. They were part of the so-called aggressors, races that exist in any and all dimensions, and they were an enemy Veelgrind had clashed with many times in her long journey. The idea of running into them yet again made her groan, but she still held out hope that these Yoma were something else. Yoma are Yoma. That is the only way to describe them. Not even I know what they truly are. The Emperor, not Minamoto, answered the question. Realizing that Minamoto was immobilized, Jensei opted for a change in strategy. While Minamoto occupied Veelgrind's attention, he would move to evacuate the Emperor from the room. The way the two of them instantly switched roles on their feet with no previous instruction indicated just how deeply they trusted each other. The attempt to extract the Emperor was all but doomed to fail, but it was still a strategy worth trying. It was the Emperor himself who put an end to it. Your Majesty. It is fine. Somehow, this person fills me with a sense of nostalgia. And I am already in the safest location in the capital, protected by layers of defense. Where else could I possibly flee to? This person avoided all our security on her way here. I doubt I could ever fully escape her. He was right. The Empire, the conquering Empire of Japan, to give its full name, was currently at war with a vast, powerful enemy, hence their current state of high alert. If someone had actually penetrated this far past their strict defenses, that was as good as being defeated. But more to the point, the Emperor couldn't find it in himself to fear Veelgrind. Like he'd said, she reminded him of old times, times that filled him with a sense of relief. So he decided to trust in Veelgrind. They would go over what was happening, and if possible, he thought, he could recruit her as their ally. They were still in the bedchamber, enjoying some tea and light snacks brought in by attendants. First, let me introduce myself. I've already given my name, but I am Veelgrind. My name is Jensei. Jensei Akari. I am tasked with guarding His Majesty. And I am Saburo Minamoto, captain of the Imperial Palace Swordsman Guard. I see. Good to meet you. And you, Ludora? Veelgrind demonstrated little interest in the bodyguards. She promptly turned her attention toward the one she loved. I never expected such a beauty to be attending to me at my advanced age. I don't dislike it, but I can't help but wish I were even a little bit younger. My. Even you can give out flattery, Ludora? What a rare experience. Heh. I didn't mean it as such. But very well. My name is Oharu. I thought I was better known than that in this realm, but perhaps old age has made me grow conceited. His name was renowned far and wide, as was his reputation as a wise ruler. But Oharu was his real, non-regal name, and not one normally spoken in common circles. Not even those relatively close to the Emperor used it to refer to him, but it was still a name known and respected by every one of his citizens. Still, to Veelgrind, he was Ludora. Even if it wasn't considered taboo to call the Emperor Oharu to his face, she had no intention of doing so in the first place. He. You'd have no way of knowing, of course. I only came to this world at the very first moment I met you here. The you that I know is named Ludora, and I will keep calling you that. It was a shockingly rude way to speak to royalty. But one smile from the Emperor indicated that this was fully allowed. That is fine. Your Majesty. I don't mind. A small price to pay, if it earns me the favor of this goddess. However, I'm afraid I cannot allow you to stand by my side in public. No? Why not? I have my own position to uphold. If I am waited upon by someone who calls me a name no one's heard before, it would cause needless worry for my retainers. If Vielgrind were to exercise her powers in front of everyone in the Empire, that would likely lead to chaos. The Emperor was making this request merely to keep things simple for himself. Vielgrind, understanding that, resolved not to push her personal will on him any further. She wanted to meekly accept any requests Ludora had for her, so for now, she went along with it. That wasn't as important as learning what was going on here anyway. In that case, we'll need to figure out how I should present myself at times when I need to be in public. Can you explain to me exactly what the current situation is in this place? Vielgrind was never one to beat around the bush. If Ludora was facing a crisis, she was ready to provide any help needed. Seeing this transcendental being act like that around the Emperor immediately gave his two bodyguards headaches. This Vielgrind is boundlessly powerful, I am sure. Perhaps divine, just as His Majesty said. Wiser to seek her assistance than get on her wrong side, then? Such were Jensei's thoughts. But Minamoto was more conflicted. She seems remarkably reverent of His Majesty. Why is that? It's almost like everything is entirely natural about this. We completely failed to guard him, but His Majesty is allowing this, and I am in no position to intervene. But what about Her Majesty the Empress, and the Imperial Prince? How will we explain this to them? Minamoto's mind was pondering real, concrete problems. In some worlds, it would have been a given that someone as lofty as a king or emperor would keep one or two mistresses without anyone batting an eye, but not here. The emperor's spouse was always expected to come from the right sort of pedigree, since any child they produced would become a member of the royal lineage. The women surrounding the emperor were obliged to stay in highly stratified positions. An impenetrable wall was in place at all times between the empress and the concubines. They would have to present Vielgrind to the court as a concubine, there was no other option. But will this woman be satisfied with that? If she demands to be installed as empress, there's nothing we can do to stop her. The worry-prone Minamoto was already thinking well into the future. His duty was to guard the imperial palace, but if the emperor, his wife, and Vielgrind fell into a conflict, the fallout could be disastrous. Perhaps, he thought, he wasn't worrying too much after all. There was a large burden on his mind, for he was constantly thinking about the safety of the entire court, as opposed to Jensei, who only had to protect the emperor. Still, Minamoto thought, Vielgrind deserved an answer to her question just now. Allow me to explain. Our empire, the conquering empire of Japan, currently finds itself in an extremely tense situation. In terms of the enemies we are aware of. An empire usually refers to a large group of states ruled by the supreme authority of an emperor, but in the conquering empire of Japan, that wasn't quite the nuance. Here, empire was more of a respectful term, passed down unbroken across generations, to refer to the island nation located in the eastern part of the world. Its emperor, and the guardians who served him, protected this nation's citizens from those who sided with evil. But outside the country's borders, the world was in a deep state of chaos. The empire lay to the east. To the south there was the United States of Assyria, to the north, the Greater Rossium dynasty, to the west, the Holy Arsian Empire, and in the center, the Republic of Chinese fiefdoms. These five forces had arisen to become the great leaders in their respective regions. Until a few decades ago, they had ruthlessly competed with each other for global dominance, but over time, a sort of equilibrium had established itself. As they carefully watched each other, waiting for their rival forces to decay, they'd wound up building mature international economic relationships. On the surface, war no longer existed, and an era of peace seemed ready to dawn. But national discontent over neighbors never fully vanished, and if someone earned a profit, someone else needed to lose out. This dissatisfaction built up over time, smoldering out of sight, and 4 years ago, it exploded. The trigger came when the Republic of Chinese fiefdoms suffered a large-scale drought. The lack of water led to starvation and rampant disease outbreaks. This unavoidably led to a dissident movement, but the Republic's government manipulated this discontent, pointing it outside its borders in order to protect itself. Now the entire world had gotten involved. For their first move, the Chinese turned their attention southward, to a large grain-producing region. The National People's Council voted unanimously to invade the United States of Azeria, and that signaled the beginning of war. In a flash, the entire world was in conflict. The Greater Rossium dynasty up north was the next to react after witnessing the Chinese military moves. They staged their own invasion of the Chinese mainland, and their mission was clear: to obtain land for agriculture and a warm water port. The region was suffering from an extreme drought, but that would no doubt fix itself in a few years, and so Rossium returned to its old habit of conquest. Naturally, the Chinese weren't taking this sitting down. All their remaining forces gathered to fight back, plunging the entire nation into a state of war. This was when the conquering empire of Japan got dragged in. They relied wholly on these Chinese fiefdoms for their food supply, and so were forced to deploy their military to the Republic on a humanitarian mission. That was done in the hopes it'd bring the war to a quick end, but Greater Rossium was incensed, and Japan's relationship with Azeria suffered. Japan had been forced to pick a side between Azeria and the Chinese, and it chose its main food lifeline. The Holy Arsian Empire made no moves at first, but the relative peace there didn't even last a year. It was soon the empire's turn to face severe famine, forcing it to cut off the support it had been giving other countries. The bad news continued with an accident at an oil storage facility, and the resulting fire cost the empire 3 years' worth of fuel. The evidence left on the scene indicated that it was the work of saboteurs from Rossium. The mood among the people took a sharp anti-Rossium turn, and the momentum finally drove the empire to start a military operation. One person had suspicions about all these events. This was Pulcinella, the mad priest and leader of the Holy Spiritualist Church. Spiritualism was one of the world's 3 major religions, alongside Buddhism and the Free Path, and Pulcinella, its most prominent figure, had spoken of a vision that told him of a great, evil presence behind the scenes. Affiliated churches across the land began to investigate this, and they managed to track down a Yoma that had allegedly played a major role, but by then, it was too late. So this Yoma manipulated people's greed and set off a bunch of old grudges? I'm afraid so, Minamoto replied. Looking back with a clear mind, it's simply too convenient a series of events. But once the anger of the people is ignited, it's not easy to douse the flames. And it wasn't just the spiritualist church, added Gensei. All the world's leaders picked up on this anomaly within a year's time. But there are a lot of extremists in the military. They took action in response to the enemy's sabotage, and by the time we were aware of it, there was no way left to stop the war. The other nations were in a similar state. As things stood, matters were proceeding not at all the way the upper brass wanted them to. The forces that had been deployed were nearly out of their control entirely. Just the other day, out in the ocean, a massive fleet from the United States of Azeria waged an epic sea battle against the conquering empire's proud imperial navy. The result was defeat. The preliminary reconnaissance indicated that the two sides were evenly matched, but once the conflict was underway, they'd found that the Azerian force was 3 times the size they'd anticipated. It was all the work of the Chinese fleet. They betrayed us, and unfortunately, their intentions are nowhere close to what we want. Not even the Chinese commanders were aware of this betrayal, so there was no way for Japan's intelligence apparatus to have detected it. It was already too late by the time they realized what was up, and now their military was severely damaged. But the defeat wasn't a total waste, either. There's a certain piece of intelligence my student risked his life to obtain. There is a man named Kondo who staged a brave, glorious suicide attack on the enemy fleet, but just before his death, he sent a telepathic message that the enemy commanders have been taken over by an unusually fierce Yoma. As Gensei put it, Azerian Supreme Southern Fleet Commander David Reagan and Chinese Eastern Fleet Commander Li Jinlong had both tapped into strange, mystical powers to interfere with Kondo. Realizing all hope was lost, Kondo kept gathering intelligence until the very end, when contact was finally lost. But now, Gensei somberly said, I fear he lost his life in vain. Hearing this, Veilgrind immediately understood. The Kondo that Gensei spoke of had to be none other than Lieutenant Tatsuya Kondo, a man she knew well. Chances are, she thought, Kondo was so concerned about Ludora because Ludora felt the same as the other emperor he'd once served. Perhaps he'd instinctively realized that Ludora and Oharu shared the same soul. It was the first time Veilgrind had ever felt any affinity for Kondo, and now, she could firmly believe that Kondo's loyalty was the real thing. Now Veilgrind had to wonder about not just Ludora's lingering regrets but Kondo's as well. Thinking back, Kondo had seemed frustrated about not being able to protect his home country. That was why he'd done what he did for Ludora, stopping at nothing. It was so he'd have no regrets this time. It made Veilgrind ask herself if there was anything she could do for Kondo, as late as it was. There was only one option. She had to atone for his regrets. So Veilgrind, her mind made up, focused on the conversation, taking it more seriously as Minamoto continued unaware. This Yoma, wielding the power to possess people's bodies, was swiftly reported to the world's top leaders. These leaders weren't on the front lines, however, and so they had no way to determine exactly who was being controlled. You could suspect someone if they began to act abnormally, of course, but it was hard to recall officers while they were engaged in an operation. The leaders considered publicizing these findings, but it was sure to cause general panic. Soldiers would start wondering if their commanding officers were Yoma, the entire chain of command might fall apart. It could also lead to witch hunts within their borders, which would be a disaster. That much, at least, needed to be prevented, and so their investigations continued in secret. In the end, they found that these Yoma, unlike your average Mononoke ghoul, engaged in organized group behavior. They were clearly looking to conquer, and they were active behind the scenes across the world. And also, they're incredibly strong. In our empire, we use what's called a Keikyu, an apparition scale, to measure the strength of mystical creatures. Even the weakest of these foes rank on the high end of this scale. It's unbelievable. These are truly fearsome foes, the type even an advanced swordsman or spellcaster may have trouble holding his own against. The apparition scale, from top to bottom, consisted of 6 ranks: Shinbutsu, gods and Buddhas; Kyu, demon dragons; Tenyo, heavenly ghouls; high yokai, mid yokai, and low yokai. Those in the bottom 2 ranks were called Chimimorio, evil spirits associated with rivers and mountains, and everything between high yokai and Tenyo were Okirasetsu, the man-eating fiends. With these Yoma, even the weakest foot soldiers were Tenyo class. Kondo and the soldiers serving him had discovered this during their suicide strike on the enemy fleet, and while they'd been defeated by the ringleader, their intelligence had made it through. Kondo estimated that Reagan and Lee both ranked as Q or higher on the apparition scale, and I firmly believe that is the right call. Why is that? Because Kondo was easily one of the most powerful fighters in the land of the rising sun. Even at the time of this final attack, Kondo's skill was first class. Mastering the Oboro Shinmei Ryu's ultimate move, Battle Will, gave him fighting ability on the level of a Q class. If that still wasn't